Hi, everybody. I'm Raina from Blue Cypress Books, and welcome to Book Banter. Tonight, I will be talking to Sondi Warner, who is the author of Lead Me Astray, a polyamorous paranormal romance, which from about 5 pages in, I was hit by something that I won't tell you what it is, but I was hit by it, and I was like, okay, I need to know. And I know that you will be too. This book started on Wattpad, and it had 130,000 reads on Wattpad. We're going to discuss that, a little bit about what that means, and about this book. And if you have any questions or comments during the event, type them down in the comments, and we will answer your questions in real time. So without further ado, I will welcome Sondi onto the screen. Hi, Sondi. Can you hear us? Oh, I'm going to
I can hear you.
There we go.
There we go. That's perfect. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Raina.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. This is going to be a lot of fun. So to start out, I have to ask you a little bit. Can you give us like your elevator pitch for Lead Me Astray? Because I do say that I got this book and I was like, okay, well, they're going to be on Book Banter, and so I need to read the book. And then like 5-10 pages and I'm like, I am so glad we're doing this. Like you start reading it for work and you finish reading it because you have to. Like at page
I'm so glad that you enjoyed your reading experience with it. I guess my elevator pitch would be that a young girl ends up a ghost in Overlay City, which is a shadowy world overlying New Orleans, Louisiana. She meets a psychic empath who is non-binary and a werewolf detective who's helping to solve her case. And in the midst of them connecting, of course, romance ensues.
Love it. I love that. I also love the Overlay City idea. Usually when you talk, there's paranormal things, people talk about the underbelly, like under, city. And this is over. Can you talk about like why you chose that?
Well, actually, I'm someone who's really deeply into the esoteric themes, occult theme. And when I think about that kind of concept, I don't really think about it as being the underbelly. I think of it as being something that we're constantly in connection with that many people aren't aware of. And so in that kind of mindset, you can see this being a world overlapping our everyday ordinary reality. And I thought of it in that way, kind of an overlay, like a transparent sheet covering over the world that others don't get to see unless you are ready to meet those supernaturals.
And most of those would be like supernaturals themselves. When are you a big fan of other supernatural stories, or do you pull that from your, like you were talking about more of an esoteric?
Yeah, well, it's a combination of things. Obviously, most writers are readers, and we love to be inspired by the content that keeps us going, that keeps us happy. So I'm always interested in what people consider urban fantasy, where we're seeing supernatural creatures, but they're in kind of a modern or contemporary setting. I can't list off the top of my head my favorites simply because I've been so literally busy lately. But if I go back to the things that kept feeding my soul when I was younger, obviously Interview with the Vampire. When we talk about other mediums such as television and movies, of course, I love American Gods. I like Mortal Instruments. And so when I look at these kind of supernatural worlds, you can definitely see the influence that they've had on my work. But because of my own interest in, like I said, these difficult themes, you also find that I bring my own personal twist to a lot of the concepts that you encounter in Lead Me Astray.
I would say one of the things that kept me really engaged in the story, as much as like the plot points, is that all the characters, I really felt when they were, I mean, I felt them as true, real characters, and that's a weird thing to say, but like even their interactions with each other were so genuine. It drew me into their relationships in a way that other books rarely do.
Thank you for saying that. Actually, what I was going for while I was writing this book was, like I said, the supernatural world overlaying our real world. So I wanted these characters to feel very human. I wanted them to be the kind of person that you could imagine meeting. And I was also sharing, of course, a really diverse cast. And so it was important to me that we hit on those universal themes with those characters and that they felt really human and well rounded.
Absolutely. Well, you're doing an amazing job. And even though this is your first in print book, if I'm correct, you have lots of stories on Wattpad. So I'm wondering if you'll tell us a little bit about Wattpad and what it is, what you were doing on that before this book, and then we'll go into how we got to a print book.
Absolutely. First, I want to apologize for the noise in the background. I happened to stop by my local coffee shop, and there's going to be coffee grinding going on. But to talk about Wattpad, obviously, I am a huge fan of the platform. A lot of writers go to that site as a leisure space to kind of share the content that you want to read or that you want to see without any kind of a mindset about making it a professional career. And certainly, I was one of those people too. When I started writing on Wattpad, it was in 2018. But I had been on Wattpad for quite a long while before that, more of a user, reading other people's stories. And I really didn't get too deeply involved until 2018. The backstory to that, you mentioned that Lead Me Astray is one of my first printed, traditionally published books. I've been a ghostwriter for a number of years. And so I've been writing for a really long time. But in the course of building a client list and really kind of getting my name out there with ghostwriting, there came a point where I focused a lot on one big client, and then that client closed their publishing house. And I was in a situation where it's like, oh no, maybe it's a little irresponsible to be in a creative career when you have a family, because of course I'm a mom. And I was getting a little down about it. I was feeling a little dejected about that experience, but it happened to be my teenage daughter, who at the time was a huge fan of Wattpad. She wasn't even talking about the platform itself. She just came and said, Mom, if you like to write, forget about the metrics, forget about the markets, and just write, because you enjoy doing. And that's the kind of message that I want to come to opportunity, not only craft your writing, where you can get direct feedback, readers,
Your audio broke up a little bit there. So I missed the last of what you said. But I know we were talking, you're talking about Wattpad and your experience with Wattpad and getting into that. When you're, so I'm going to back up a little bit. So when your teenage daughter at the time mentioned that just use Wattpad as an outlet for your writing, which of course they tell everybody to do. You want to write, just write. And so that was insightful from what I heard of you say. I mean, that was very insightful of her to give you that advice and just sort of gave you this outlet to start writing. And I don't know if you went to kind of pick up a little bit, see if your audio is working a little bit better again to pick up from that. I felt like I missed the part where you actually got started writing, like what you did first. So you can check your audio and see if it's working better now. Let's see. She looks like she's frozen a little bit. So I'm going to give Sondi just a minute to reset her connection there and get back with us. But in the meantime, I know that Wattpad was started mostly as fan fiction. They were mostly doing fan fiction, which is a whole like subgenre of those amazing amounts of writing out there of fan fiction. But then evolved further into original fiction, not just fan fiction. So let me see. Sondi looks like she's back. Hi.
Yes. Sorry about that, Raina. We lost connection for just a moment there, but I heard you on the tail end of that when I got back on. You were talking about the Wattpad platform, and you actually hit the nail on the head. It was certainly a space for a lot of young writers to come and write their fan fiction or share their short stories. Please let me know if you have any trouble hearing me throughout this broadcast. But it was certainly a space for fan fiction. It became popularized for that. And in some ways, I think a lot of readers today are people who are not familiar with the platform or who haven't seen its evolution over time, may still think of it as a space where people go to share their fan fiction. And listen, I'm a big fan of fan fiction. So I think it's wonderful that there are writers on Wattpad sharing their stories that are incorporating these worlds from these other media sources. But Wattpad has evolved so much further beyond that. And what I've seen in my short time there, actively posting and publishing since 2018 is that you're going to come across a wide range of different genres. The thing that leaps out to me the most about this is because Wattpad is a global platform. There's so much diversity and there's so many different types of stories. And also when you scale it down where the writers are, the popular writers are between 18 to 25, you're getting content that Gen Z really loves. And so to me, it's the best space to get in as a learning writer and as a career writer to see what's really working with the younger demographic when it comes to what they want to read, because our readers on Wattpad are incredibly active.
Well, that's a piece I wanted to ask you too, like, because it's a sort of a self-contained platform and you have all of these users. Does feedback come fast then? Like, if you put something out, they can just tell you
anything. And that might sound scary, but it's actually fantastic. The one thing that I tell people, like I said, I started off in ghostwriting. I've done this for quite some time as a ghostwriter. And I had to develop thick skin because your critics, your reviewers are just not going to come kindly. No matter how much work you put into something, there's no such thing as a perfect product. And of course, you just can't please everyone. What I found about working on this particular platform is having that instant reader engagement where they can highlight a section of your story and leave an immediate comment about what they like, what they don't like. That kind of feedback can actually, if you use it, help you to become a better communicator. The other thing that I like about it is that the Wattpad community really is incredibly kind. So even if you're getting a critique or some feedback about something that you might need to improve or change, they certainly aren't cruel. They're not going to come troll your post the majority of the time. And I love the fact that this platform has controls in place so that if you run into any problems with anyone, of course, it's fantastic to be able to escalate that up higher so that people can, you can mute things, you can block people. But I've never had a bad experience. And I want to tell you, you've read Lead Me Astray. This is a different type of book. But with this book being so different, you'd think it would attract a lot of negative, negative engagement, and it simply has not.
I mean, that's amazing to hear. And I'm so happy that you found that space. But also, like you're saying, like having a system built in where if somebody was not being constructive criticism, just lashing out, there is a system in place to kind of go, hey, would you check on that person? Just see if are they doing this to everybody? Are they really, how is that working? Because that is so nice in any space to have that sort of like checks and balance, if you will. And yeah, like the trolls are gonna come from somewhere with anything, but you're doing such an amazing job. But there are definitely triggers out there for people in this book, and they will let you know. I'm wondering if, so this book is set in New Orleans, and I haven't read any of your other work on Wattpad. Is this unique? Are your other stories set in New Orleans? Because I know you live in Baton Rouge, right? So are you from here? This is like 3 questions.
Yeah, and in fact, you actually reflected me back to the question that you asked before about the content that I write on Wattpad. I have a couple of short stories. I write across multiple different genres, but my preferred is like Lead Me Astray, paranormal romance. the overall city, I would like to extend it into a series. So I'm working on some content now with the same world that would be set in New Orleans as well. And I have a summer beach read that is also very polyamorous, and that is posting regularly on Wattpad at this time. It's not explicitly expresses things in New Orleans. It is set in New Orleans within the canon of my mind. It comes together where I'm actually raised in Lower Louisiana, in the north end of Baton Rouge. And my family's been here all our lives, and I went to the University of LSU, and so it became known I migrated the country over to the city. So that has been instrumental in kind of setting a framework for where my stories are set. I love Louisiana, and I feel like I have such an amazing culture here that I just want to share that with my peers.
What and in your book here, and in so many books set in and around New Orleans, the city becomes a character. It just we've said that millions of times on this show. It's just like the city does really become a character, and in this story, it's really interesting because you have two, right? You have New Orleans as we see it now, and then you have overlay. So I mean, I'm gonna talk about the basement apartment, which shows up in like chapter 2 or something early on. And the minute they're gonna walk into this basement apartment, I went, man, because you're like, I knew you were from here. I know that you know this area, and I'm like, I cannot believe she said basement apartment. Like, because you're just that can't be. We're under sea level. But then it's like a couple pages later, or the next chapter, like right there, you're like, oh, here's how. And right there in that example, you see, the magic is what allowed that basement, apartment to occur. And right there, you've got both cities, in that happening right in front of you. And so you've got almost the city gets a double character in this book.
It really does. It really does. And that's one of the reasons why I chose New Orleans as well, because it lends incredibly well to the concept of a kind of supernatural space within New Orleans, separate from Overlay City. Most travelers, most tourists who come to New Orleans talk about how enchanting the city is. There's so much history here. There's so much personality here. We've got so many ethnic backgrounds that have kind of centered here. And the backstory or the kind of world building for Overlay City is that it is a space where ley lines converge. And so it attracts supernaturals because ley lines will naturally attract these magical creatures, and allowing the kind of the vibe of New Orleans with this already kind of supernatural themes to blend seamlessly with this supernatural world of Overlay City was incredibly easy to do. But you started off, you mentioned that the city itself often becomes a character in books that are set in that area. And it is true. I don't think that Lead Me Astray would have been the same type of story if it were set anywhere else. And there are those little Easter eggs like that you notice that anyone from here would immediately say, basement apartment, what are you talking about? Anyone anywhere else, that's not something that they would actually just inherently know. And so you can see there where I wrote this with Louisiana in mind, with people from here in mind. And I think that that's another way, kind of my love letter to our state.
Absolutely. And with Wattpad being international, like you said, and to have all of these readers all over the world, and still paying that attention to detail for the people in New Orleans or in Louisiana that really know New Orleans, I think is special. Like it's I appreciate it for sure being here, but also because you're true to the city, people who don't live here or might never ever be here get a better feel for what New Orleans really is when they're reading it, from halfway around the world. Do you get feedback? Do you get feedback from all over the world on Wattpad for your stories? And then like, do you hear anything like that from them where they're getting to know where you're writing? Oh, you're still muted. Sondi's connection in that coffee shop is coming in and out. But I am fascinated by this idea that she gets to write the stories. Let's see if she gets to write these stories, and automatically as they're being posted, you're able to get this international feedback, and wonder if you get feedback specifically about the where you're writing, the city that you're writing about.
Right. I haven't gotten to feedback about that. I have had some questions about things like our weather. Let me know if I go out on you again. But in Lead Me Astray, we have tropical storms show up. We have hurricanes show up. So those were details that, because I knew I was also writing for an international audience, I knew that I'd have to explain that. Yes, you could be having a perfectly normal week, and then, tropical storm warning changes everything. And so while I hadn't had any direct comments about that, it's something that was in the back of my mind while writing and posting that.
So Linda has a question about other paranormal romance recommendations. This is her first paranormal romance, and are there others you recommend? And you were saying earlier that it was hard to pick ones, but maybe you can think about a couple and see if you come up with some by the end of the event. I do wonder about, since you posted this book originally on Wattpad, what was the process of going from a story on Wattpad that you could read just on the internet, and then to this? How did that happen?
The process is incredibly non-traditional, as has been everything with my writing career. I wrote Lead Me Astray, and Wattpad has an annual writing competition called the Waddies. And it's a fantastic program. Last year, it was actually live streamed, which was really fun to watch. And I hope that they will do the same thing this year. Think of it as award season, like what you would see with the Grammys or the Oscars or things like that. So it's a really fun experience, especially for new writers or novices or newbies who have their content out there and enter that competition and win. But in 2019, when I completed Lead Me Astray, I skated in at the last minute, right, like literally 15 minutes or 5 minutes before the deadline. And I entered the competition just, as let me just try that. And I actually happened to win the Waddies. When Lead Me Astray won the Waddies, thank you. When it won the Waddies, a lot of opportunities began to stream in. And so right away, they asked me to be a part of their online stories program, wherein the digital version of the book would be put behind a paywall. And so you could read the first couple of chapters for free. And then if you liked it, you could unlock more chapters as you went, which is something that I am really pleased about, because one thing as a writer, obviously any creative wants to be able to put their content out there and share with an audience. But of course, we love to have some kind of financial incentive to do that. So it was fantastic when it became a part of that program. And then shortly thereafter, Wattpad opened up its publishing company, which was something that I did not expect. But when they did, they were only publishing young adult fiction. So I knew there was just no chance. There was no chance that Lead Me Astray was going to get published. It was fantastic that at the end of 2021, W by Wattpad Books was in the works. And so they were announced, and Lead Me Astray is one of the first titles being published under that imprint by Wattpad Books. So as you can see, that's an incredibly non-traditional pathway to traditional publishing. Yeah, and it was a whirlwind, kind of an exciting ride, because none of it was expected.
Because I imagine when you put it on Wattpad, you're just like, okay, it's out there now. Like, yeah. The potential for it going much further than that is where it is going. It's going
exactly. That's exactly right. And it was perfectly fine because, like I said, at the time that I started writing it, I was in such a kind of low space behind wondering if I should continue writing. Is that irresponsible of me? Do I need a more stable career? And so it was an opportunity to just do something for fun. So I didn't, like you said, there was no thought that, it's going to go further. There was no further for it to go. If someone's reading it, that's fantastic. And I'm happy about that.
Absolutely. So how's the process of having this now that it's out in the world? Like, are you getting different feedback? Do you have how does that feel? Like having a book in your hands that's got your name on it.
It has been phenomenal. I have done a lot of writing as a freelancer and as a ghostwriter. So I've had the opportunity to walk into a bookstore and say to myself, I wrote that book. Mm-hmm. But I have never had the experience of saying, that's my book, that's my name, that's my story. And that has been really exciting. I know the golden rule is don't read your reviews, but I regularly, I can't get away from it. I read all my reviews. It's like, yay, because even the bad reviews are saying good things. It's like, well, thank you for not liking it, but liking this part. And of course, I'm someone who loves feedback. Feedback is actually kind of the reason why Wattpad has my soul, because feedback, I think, helps us to become better. There's no such thing as stopping the learning process. If you feel like you've topped out at your, if you've maxed out your ability, then maybe you should get out of it. And so feedback, even from reviews, just feels fantastic to get. So it has been quite a journey. The most interesting thing I'll tell you, a couple of my people I know locally, they aren't my friends, but they were people my acquaintances. And so it was really surprising when one of them stopped me and said, hey, we've got this running thing at the job where all of us have the book, and whoever doesn't finish reading the chapter that we're on for the month, they have to buy lunch. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. That was a really fun experience. So yeah, it has been quite different. And I couldn't ask for anything more. It's really fun.
Well, and I will tell you just an anecdote from Blue Cypress is when we're doing a virtual event such as this, we order a couple of copies, because you never know, it's a virtual event and people they're not forced to sit in the room and then pressured to buy the book, so you usually start with a couple of copies and we make a little display and everything, and then we sold them, and I was like, well, I need one, and I didn't get mine yet. So I was like, okay, so we replenish, we put them up on the table, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna take this home, and I set it on the like shelf behind the register, and I think at the end of the day, right? And somebody's like, what's that? What is that book? And I'm like, oh, well, and I give them the little spiel, what I know, I hadn't read it yet, and I'm like, oh, well, is that for someone? I'm like, well, no, this is, you can have it. So, so then we sold those. And then the same thing, like, then we were up to like 4. I finally got mine. Like, we're replenishing. And when I left the store yesterday, there was only the one on the stand. So we had sold the ones underneath it too. And I'm like, this is amazing. And I love when that happens, and it's just kind of organically, because all of that is before the event. So before anybody's tuning in and watching us now, which I can see you all, hi. And, before that's all out there, we're still selling these multiple copies, and because they genuinely, and this has got to be the part I would assume that feels really good, walks in, sees a cover, reads the back and goes, yes, this is for me. This is the one. So, Ghosts and Werewolves in New Orleans.
Yes. Yeah, and
so that's
you say that.
But for you.
Thank you for telling me about that, and thank you for sacrificing your copy for the greater good. That was actually the experience. My mom had the same experience. She went out to buy a copy of the book, and it was sold out. She had to search around for it because they were out of stock at that point. That was the first week it came out. I had friends from out of state saying, "Hey, I sent all my friends to get the book, but I got the last copy." It's like, that has been surprising, because truly, I wrote Lead Me Astray as a book that I would enjoy reading. And I guess I kind of intentionally eschewed traditional tropes or eschewed these kind of, this mainstream narrative. I intentionally went for something that was gritty and different and unconventional. And so it really is surprising that since I started writing that book where no one would have touched it or published it, to now that Wattpad took that amazing chance and published my book, I have seen, you're not the first person to tell me that they're having a hard time keeping it in stock. So yes, that does feel amazing as well.
Oh, absolutely. And when oh my gosh, I just completely lost exactly what I was going to say. But I mean, sacrificing it for the greater good, it's always the greater good if I can put it into people's hands. So you said that you were working to not follow those traditional tropes and everything, and I mean, obviously that's working in your favor. It's so well done and so well put together, and I'm, like I said, page turner is absolutely a way I would describe this book. And people are ready to hear stories that they don't hear all the time. And they're ready to read them, I think, with a level of honesty and just like you said, just they're genuine people and not trophy, not put up, look, we're gonna examine this today. That's like, I feel like a lot of books, and I have done that in the past, and I know that that's a process. Whenever you're introducing a new concept to the masses, you start with tokenism and you draw it into just being. And I think your book does that beautifully. All the characters, despite their sexual orientation or their gender fluidity or their paranormal, I'm not sure what the right term is for that, werewolf, ghost.
Right. They're supernatural type.
They're
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yes. They're just people. And that is amazing. And I think that is really drawing people to come back and people to tell their friends about your book.
I'm really glad about that.
Do you know Cortland Jackson?
Yes, I do. Hi, Cortland. It's great to see you here.
Excellent. So, did you come up with any other paranormal romances?
I did. I have one. As soon as you asked me, it popped into my head, and this is a Wattpad book. It's by Lux Raven. Go out there and check it out. If you like Lead Me Astray, then you're gonna love The Siren by Lux Raven on Wattpad. It's an amazing paranormal story, and it's dealing with, of course, sirens. And everything that I've seen about it, it really kind of has drawn me in. I don't know Lux personally. A lot of the writers on Wattpad, we're a little bit of a community, so we tend to know each other. But I don't know Lux personally. But I like everything that I see happening with the sirens. So yeah, definitely, if you're into something like Lead Me Astray, I think you'll enjoy that as well.
Yeah, and you can I posted a link to Sondi's work on Wattpad. You can use that link and then use the search function. I'm sure you can find Lux Raven through there. I now that I've read your book and I barely kind of knew what Wattpad was, I'm definitely going to go over there and start searching through a little bit more just to see what's out there. It's so interesting. It's like discovering new writers. And like you said, being international, I love reading like books in translation. So this is like going right to the source.
Absolutely. And not only that, like I said, a lot of the writers are new. They're not, that's the thing that you have happen when you're an expert. You get to a point where you know so much, you're no longer learning, right? And if you're a newer writer, you're taking more chances because there's so much you don't know, right? And ironically enough, not knowing too much makes it to where those writers are taking some amazing chances. They're being risk takers. They're pushing subjects and topics that might have once been considered not necessarily something to bring to the mainstream. And I don't mean that in a taboo way. I mean sincerely discussing things through the lens of real world perspectives instead of these kind of tried and true stereotypical television family type stories. And so that is a thing that you will find if you get over to Wattpad. If you're looking for what's new, what's different, what's going to be popular in like literally across the market within the next year or two, I tell everyone, start at Wattpad because they are so ahead of the curve. Those writers are amazing. They blow me away.
Well, and like you said, they don't have these preconceived notions of what they're not supposed to do. And whether that's, like you said, taboo, or just the industry won't like this, or no one will read this because it doesn't, whatever. There's none of that. They're just putting what they feel a story that is good out into that medium. And I love that idea. It is what breeds creativity, this new, something innovative for sure. So you have quite a few stories on Wattpad, and I know that this is your first and it just came out in print, but like, what would you want your next in print to be? If you got to just pick what your next in print book would be, what would it be?
If I got to just pick what my next in print book would be, it would absolutely be book 2 of the Overlay City series. And that's unofficial. Right now, it's just Lead Me Astray. Unofficially, it's a series in my head. And the next book in that series is Into the Wild Dark. What I'm doing for Pride Month is I will be releasing the opening chapters to that book this month. So I'd like for people to keep their eyes on my social media. I am on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I'm also on YouTube. I haven't made much content lately, but I'm there as well. But if you really want to keep up to date to know when I drop those chapters, check me out on Instagram. Into the Wild Dark is the sequel to Lead Me Astray. So whether it comes out in print or not, you'll still be able to see what happens with the rest of that story on Wattpad, and it will be free to read. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
If you needed to talk someone into signing up for Wattpad, you've just done it. I'm there. I will do, if I do nothing else, I will, whatever, like make a reminder or a follow or whatever it is that you do on Wattpad to make sure that I know when the next time is that you put out a chapter. Because I need to know what we do next.
I'm so happy that you enjoyed it. You're definitely brightening my day with that. Thank you, Raina.
Good. I am glad. That is part of my job as a bookseller is getting my hands on these stories that other people might not have heard yet, and then figuring out how to get them as excited about it as I am and get it into their hands. So I love being part of your team because it goes from you to the reader, and I'm a medium for that.
That is a supernatural power you have there. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Well, we're getting to the end of our time, and I just wanted to, thank you again for joining me for Book Banter and giving me and our listeners and our customers at the bookstore this opportunity to connect all these pieces.
It has been an absolute pleasure. I am happy to be here with you, and hopefully we'll be back together with the book too, if it does come out.
I'm in. You know where to find me. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us for Book Banter this evening. And follow those links in the comments to purchase Lead Me Astray from Blue Cypress Books and to look at the rest of Sondi's work on Wattpad. And of course, be ready for the first chapter of the next book. You'll find all that on Wattpad. And have a good night, everybody.